Welcome back, everybody, to the Behind the Food podcast. Today we have Christina Dordrecht with us. She's the founder of Willis, which I'm a super big fan of. My kids are too. And I also have my co-host here, Daniel,
What's up,
to
guys?
ask her a bunch of questions about her life. So, Christina, I usually like to start off with just like what made you want to start Willis? Like, why did it happen in the first place? Why did you choose to do this thing in CPG, which is a terrible journey usually in the beginning for almost every founder. So I'm always
Certainly
curious, like
not
what
easy.
made you want to do it?
Yeah. Well, I think we all have a little bit of naivety before we start a food or beverage brand, right? You really can't fully 100% know what this is like until you're in it. And maybe that's part of the benefit of being naive. I don't know if people would quit their successful careers and day jobs if they knew how hard it could be. But I'm actually, as I talk about that, I'm glad I didn't know, to be honest, because I don't know if I would have had the threshold for risk that I didn't know what I was capable of in terms of my threshold for risk. But before Willas, I really loved my career. It wasn't like I was really unhappy in it. I was a director of strategy in advertising and innovation and brand agencies. I was building brands. I was coming up with, strategies with upper leadership on the client side, the CMOs, the CEOs at times. And we were looking at the intersection of where culture was headed, the business opportunities, doing the analysis, as well as just looking at the consumer. We did a ton of consumer research to kind of understand where that intersection was between where people were headed, what people were looking for, where the gaps in the market were, and what the goals were for the client. And then working really closely with the creative team to make sure that whatever we created, whether it's a TV spot or a social strategy or a logo, that it delivered on those business objectives. And so in many ways, it was a wonderful training ground for entrepreneurial life. It was also one where I was working really long hours. I didn't know when I was going to leave to go home at night. I mean, frequently my husband would make dinner because he might get home earlier than I did. And I'd be like, oh, I'm going to be home by 8. And then be like 9:30. But it was really rewarding. It was a super collaborative environment. As I kind of got further along in my career, I kept coming back to entrepreneurship. My sister and I had ideas. My husband and I had ideas. And there was kind of a bunch of things that happened around 2017, 2018 that led me to start Willis. One was I was kind of on a health kick. I had been for a while, but I got way more interested in gut health. When I moved to New York, I had had a lot of sinus infections and was on a lot of antibiotics and was feeling the effects of that. And so I got really into that. Got an integrative doctor, was learning a lot more about our food system. And at the time, I'm lactose intolerant. I was drinking plant-based milks. My grandmother really did used to make oat milk, and I was buying them. And I was like, the ingredients on these labels is not plant-based. It's artificial ingredients, tons of oils that actually make me feel worse than dairy, lots of sugar. There weren't really organic options. And I just knew there was a better way. And at the same time, I was kind of at a point in my career where I was noticing that the further up you got, the less you got to do of the things that I loved about that world. And so it was just kind of this moment of like, it felt like a bigger risk not to go for this idea and give it a shot than to go for it. So I gave myself 3 months. I was like, I'm going to take 3 months. I did some freelance work for the agency Anomaly I'd been working for a while. And I just wanted to see how far we could get and if there were signals that we were onto something. And we just kept getting more and more signals that we were. People were really excited about what we were doing. And so my sister and my husband came on board. My sister's background is the exact opposite of mine. She is a chemical engineer. She's a Six Sigma black belt. She is absolutely brilliant when it comes to food and beverage manufacturing. And she's also now an MBA. And so we were kind of like two sides of a coin growing up. I loved the humanities in high school. She loved chemistry, but that was perfect for starting this business together. And then my husband's background is really entrepreneurial. He worked in the film industry. He was always been a freelancer. He was a corporate trainer for Dale Carnegie, taught leadership and sales training. So we all came with different skill sets, which was really, really helpful. And we also have just the utmost trust in each of our own skill sets. I really trust Elena when something comes up on a production run. We really trust Rusty when we've got, a question about a sales conversation or a tricky conversation with a vendor. They trust me when it comes to brand, but we all work with each other on all of these things. And it just sort of magic started to happen. And so we kept going, and it was really hard. Our first few years were bananas, in terms of just the things that happened. But it is rewarding in the exact opposite way of a regular career, I would say. You're not working for that vacation time and that paycheck in the same way, but the internal rewards are so fruitful. And I have a mentor who said to me one time, he was like, entrepreneurship is the only way. And I think for some of us that's true. It's definitely been true for
Yeah, I
me.
was gonna say, like, if you back up to like what you were saying in the beginning, like you were working a lot for like your actual day job and like putting in like entrepreneur style hours. I always think it's interesting that there are a lot of people like in that corporate trap where it's like, you basically already are an entrepreneur, except you have single client risk because you could get laid off. Um,
Yeah.
there's only one place your money's coming from. Um, whereas with Willis, it's like millions of people. Like there's a lot of people. If you think about it, you're like, there's actually lots of people that are buying my thing, and so the money's not necessarily coming from one place. Although it feels super risky. How old were you when you made the jump from like I have a 9 to 5 job to we're gonna do this thing and we're gonna give ourselves the 3 months? I also find it interesting that like your husband was already kind of a freelancer, so you guys went from like we have someone in the household that has stable income to like nobody has stable income, which I feel that so deeply because Megan and I started No Bakes when we were 23. I haven't had a stable income since I was 23, which
Right.
I think it comes with good things and bad things. It comes with a lot of freedom and a lot of reward, like you said, but it also comes with like a lot of risk. I think that
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if it's risk or if it's just instability, like the unpredictability of it all.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call that risk. It's more like
Yeah, I'm with
I don't know
you.
what's going to happen tomorrow.
I think there's a bit of a false sense of security in, I'll just say it, like the narratives that we're taught. We're taught to go get a job and stay in that job for a long time if we can, and buy a house and stay put. And I think that is like the right path for probably most people. But there is inherent risk in all of that, right? Like, people don't keep their jobs as long as they used to. There are layoffs all over the place right now. Like, there's always risk in everything. And I think also like your soul matters in this conversation too, right? As somebody who's been in jobs where I felt like, wow, I feel very disconnected from myself. So yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, what's interesting is you talk about having like a family team, right? So you've got your sister, you've got your husband, you kind of have domain expertise in different areas. And that's similar to my story where my brother Kai is the creative and I'm more the operational side. Jimmy and Megan, you've got a similar story where you've got more of a creative and an operational. So one question I have is when you're dealing with this both family and business dynamic where the lines get blurred a lot of times where it's more collaborative than it is like we have these set, really set roles. How do you know when it's like, hey, you're kind of stepping on my toes a little bit. I feel like this is my space versus like, hey, this is something we should collaborate on and, maybe blur the lines a little bit here.
Yeah, I think the key is to come to these conversations with curiosity and knowledge that there might be somebody who understands something better. And equally, you might be somebody who's a little bit further out and not in the weeds. So you might bring something to the table just by not being in that piece day to day. And I think acknowledging all of those pieces really helps because as I think about it, thankfully, we don't have a lot of tension around stepping on each other's toes. But that might also come from I think sometimes when you've got more confidence in your abilities, you're less likely to even see it as somebody stepping on your toes. Like for
Totally.
packaging design, for example, I look at our packaging design, I love it. And every time I look at it, I think of things I want to change. And I'm also too close to it. So I will send it to, Elena and Laura, whose backgrounds are in, chemical engineering and R&D and manufacturing. And they'll look at it and come up with things that I'm like, oh, shit, you're right, And so I think just like being open to all perspectives, but I think also like respecting where someone comes from if they have just a ton of knowledge and background and foundational learning that you don't have, like respecting that and understanding that they have lessons that you don't, you know.
Totally. I think that like what we kind of hit on there is the idea that if the personal relationship is healthy to start with, right, the non-business relationship, hopefully that bleeds over to having
Yeah.
a healthy business relationship as well. Because yeah, I've seen, like Jimmy and I were going to interview a founder the other day where if a co-founding relationship, husband and wife didn't go so well. And yeah, if the relationship isn't healthy, then the business isn't, the business relationship isn't healthy either.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. We started seeing, we all see therapists on our own. We encourage everyone on our
Nice.
team to see therapists. Sometimes we'll see a therapist together. I mean, I'm the older sister. So I also have had to do the work of like, I'm the older sister, which if I go back to my like child self, I've gotta, rein that in, right? So yeah, just being like aware of those dynamics is so important.
Eldest brother here, I completely understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, Daniel's understating it. He's the eldest brother of 13 people. Well, he's the 13th
Wow.
or the first, I guess,
Wow.
the first of
The first,
13.
yeah,
So
that's
there's
right, the first.
12 other people.
Wow. So
Yeah,
you're almost
Um,
third parent as well, right?
exactly.
he's third parent. Yeah.
You know all about that. You know what I'm talking about. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, like I've seen like people ask all the time, like, should I get in business with my family? And I say it depends. It really depends. If you have a great, strong relationship, it'll probably go well. If it isn't, it's probably a bad idea. And sometimes like the business just puts a magnifying glass on that relationship, and you have to you see weaknesses and strengths you didn't know you had, right? So sometimes,
Definitely.
like I remember we were talking to was it Jake Carl, Midday Squares, and he was talking about how
Probably.
like I think they do group therapy as well, they're like I think brother, sister, husband, I think something like that. So similar kind of team, and they kind of go through the whole group therapy thing as well to make sure that they're all aligned and functioning smoothly personally before they have to deal with the business, because it bleeds over too, right? It's like
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard to know where that line crosses between our personal relationship and our business relationship. Sometimes it's one and the same thing, and so you can't always draw those nice hard and fast lines between one or the other. Yeah, I think Jimmy lost
Oh,
connections, or
shoot.
he'll be back really shortly. It happens
Sounds
sometimes.
good.
Riverside is a great platform, but it's not always perfect. So
Yeah,
yeah,
all good.
you do this 90-day kind of 3-month lead in, and then you've got these two partners you bring on. Did you guys do a raise, like a seed round or an angel round, to get to that point?
We didn't start raising until we've been kind of noodling on the idea for about a year. And we had the idea, it was kind of like the first year was kind of like, do we do this? Do we not do this? And then the second year was like starting on it and starting to kind of build the foundation of what we thought the brand and the business would be. And then we actually, so we let's see, we basically started by redesigning the way that plant-based milk is made. Willis is the only plant-based milk that uses whole plants. So we use the whole oat, like steel cut oats or whole oat groats, so you get more protein, more fiber, less sugar. Our competitors do it totally differently. They take the oat, filter out the good stuff, just use the sugar, process that to make it even sweeter. So basically, like, you can take corn and make it corn syrup. You can do the same thing with oats. And then they add a bunch of artificials and oil and stuff. We never, that didn't align with our values. Redesigning the way that oat milk was made took quite a long time. Developing our whole plant IP took quite a long time. We started when I was around 33 or something in 2017, 2018, really started kind of hitting the ground running in 2019 and 2020, and started raising in 2020 and 2021. That was kind of like family, friends, colleagues, former coworkers. And then we started meeting so many founders asking for advice, and they ended up investing. So yeah, and then going back to what you were saying about like the family dynamics, we've really had to set up boundaries. Like my sister and I, Elena, we have to decide, like, are we getting together as sisters for fun, or are we getting together to talk about Willis? And we like decide that before we hang out or before we have a conversation if it's not clear. My husband and I have boundaries. We like literally will say at dinner time, like, I have two things I want to talk about, and then let's set a boundary. Are you cool with that? Like, you just kind of have to. Otherwise, at least in the early days, it started bleeding into everywhere, and that's how you burn out and kind of get diminishing returns. So we had to learn that early on.
Yeah, Megan
Absolutely.
and I rarely talk about Novict anymore when we're at home. Um, Mostly because our kids talk over us whenever we decide we're going to talk, which is just spectacular. Um, but also because it gets exhausting, right? Like as
Yeah.
you like always talk about the thing that you're building, I think there's like passion there for like 5 years, 7 years. And then after a while, once you like get close to like a decade, it's like, why are we talking about this all the time? We could talk about other things. We could have other hobbies or interests outside of just making food. Yeah, it's definitely something where you definitely have to set boundaries. So, what was the first early sign for you guys? You said like when you took those first 3 months away from your job, and you were like, oh, we're going to look for like early signs, like early signals of like traction. What were those signals for you when you guys were first getting started?
Yeah. Um, so from a business perspective and a how big is this category perspective, I remember being at a hotel on like a work trip and being like, wow, there are coffee shops all over this hotel. There's a breakfast buffet with plant-based milks. Like it is everywhere. It's in the grocery store, it's at work, it's at, food service. And I thought this is a massive category. And then, started pulling data and was seeing that. But it was a massive category that wasn't really delivering on what it promised, right? It's supposed to be plant-based, but like you're not really getting any nutritional benefits or plants from it. So for me, if I started a business, I knew that I wanted it to have a really clear mission and I wanted to have a positive impact on people's health and on the planet. And I thought this is a way we can do that. It's also a reason why we didn't start with almond milk, right? Like we wanted to use ingredients that were good for soil health, that were good for ecosystems, that were cover crops, that are good for our gut health and good for the microbiome of the soil. So there was just an alignment between all of those things. And then I was talking to friends, I was talking to coworkers, I was talking to people I knew who had a lot more experience in like retail, merchandising and things like that. And then we started going on it and we didn't even have a brand name. And I applied for this pretty, well recognized food accelerator and got in we hadn't even decided if we were going to name it after my grandmother yet. Got in and they were really excited about what we were doing. And didn't even end up doing that accelerator, but it was just like another proof point, like, oh, we rose to the top in the applications of new brands. So there were things like that. And then once we had like benchtop samples and we did our first like test run, we started doing events at WeWorks where we would make matcha lattes in the morning or cocktails without milk in the evening. And we'd be sampling hundreds of people in a couple hours. So we got to have all of these conversations, and that was just amazing data and consumer insight that came out of that.
So you had like,
Yeah.
this benchtop sampling going on. You can kind of think of that as an MVP, right?
Right.
How many iterations did you go from like that benchtop sample to what's in the box today? Is it like two,
Oh
three,
my
four? Is
God.
like countless iterations at this point?
Hundreds. Like
Yeah.
honestly, Elena and my mom were doing rounds and rounds of my grandmother's recipe on weekends for what seemed like forever. I don't even know how long. And that was really just to refine it and make sure that it not only tasted delicious, it worked well in coffee, it worked well in tea, tasted good with cereal. It was a crowd pleaser to all different palates and people. And so yeah, we really wanted to nail it. We didn't want it to be like a product where it's like, oh, you could take it or leave it. We wanted it to be something that was a staple in people's day. And that means people need to really love it and love it in multiple, use cases and formats.
So did you start with a recipe your grandma had and then like iterate from there? Was that kind of how this happened?
Yes and no. So early days, we thought we were going to launch in food service. I was really excited about food service. I was like, I knew retail was hard. I knew that retail, you're often relying on, one buyer's opinion. There's a lot of pressure to get product moving at the shelf. When you're an early stage brand, you don't have a huge marketing budget or a marketing budget at all. So I thought food service is perfect. And so we spent a whole year deciding on how we're going to go after offices, WeWorks, coffee shops in New York. And our launch date was around March, April 2020. So yeah, great timing, great timing. And so we ended up having to expand our strategy, and we went from having a barista product that was very much for food service, foam, froth, to then thinking we need to launch stuff for retail that's really for consumers. And I had really wanted to launch my grandmother's full recipe first, which was just oats, vanilla, sea salt, and unsweetened. And so that became our second product, but it continues to be our best selling product because it's just unmatched in the category. And it's so delicious, even though it's the healthiest oat milk you can find, probably the healthiest plant-based milk you can find, has more protein than any almond milk or coconut milk because of the whole oat and the least sugar. That kind of kicked off what became the rest of the business and the portfolio was going back to my grandmother's recipe after our
I have a
barista
question
product.
about that and your grandmother's
Yeah,
recipe. Why was she making oat milk?
yeah. She was
Like that's a
she
good.
was Yeah, she was really into cooking and nutrition, like in a big way. And food was very much love in our family. And she had this kind of innate ability to meet someone and see what was unique about them. And so she really nourished the spark in everyone around her through her amazing cooking and baking. And she made oat milk for us when we were kids and when my mom's generation were kids, because she knew that oats were really good for digestion. So if a kid has a sensitive stomach or is lactose intolerant, she just started making it and trying to make it taste good because she didn't know it was prebiotic fiber, but she knew it was really good for digestion. And so that was where it started. And now we've come full circle with our line of kids products, which were really inspired by parents and pediatricians begging us to make a healthy kids product that has a clean label, has the protein and the DHA and the calcium they need from real plant-based ingredients. So it's kind of come full circle in the last year with that launch. But yeah, she was just ahead of her time in a million ways.
Yeah, I mean
So
that's super ahead.
you started with like this set of values, right? We want to be, cover crop, plant-based, clean label, but then you also interestingly had like a heritage aspect as well, and like, a kind of a what Jimmy and I call chef-driven, not lab-driven approach, right? We've got your grandmother's recipe to start with. So it's really interesting. You kind of bridge a lot of times when people try to create a CPG product that fits a certain label requirement, they end up with something that doesn't taste great. And if they
Yeah.
start with something that is very chef driven, it may not be as good for you, right? You kind of
Yeah,
found a bridge in the middle between these two in a lot of ways.
I just don't think there's a point in eating something healthy if it doesn't taste good, or drinking something healthy if it doesn't taste good, which, we've made it harder on ourselves because, for instance, our chocolate milk, oh my gosh, I can't tell you how many versions of that we did because we wanted it to give you that like chocolate hit. Like if you are having a chocolate craving, you want chocolate. You don't want watered down chocolate. And it's got real cacao, which can be quite bitter. So to balance that, we need to add a bit of sugar, but we don't want too much sugar. And we want the right kind of sugar, like a maple sugar or a coconut sugar that doesn't spike your glucose. And I have to say, I'm probably the most proud of our chocolate products, which are most awarded. Like our chocolate oat milk got a 10 years of good food awards. So that is, they looked at all the winners of all the good food awards for the last 10 years, and it was the best beverage in milk. And frankly, in the beverage category, it was right in there with all the kombuchas and stuff. So yeah, we're really proud of that. We won't launch something unless it tastes good, not only to our team, but to other people. So we do a lot of taste testing before we launch any product.
yeah. I mean, you
Kudos,
guys
that's
very
huge.
much went around it like they went about it like they were running a restaurant, which is really cool. I think that like more people should think a little bit more about like the experience that their consumer is having and not necessarily just like the benefit that is easy to describe to the buyer. Which I think is the trap. You guys mentioned that had an eye on food service, which operates very differently than like the retail environment. And one of those reasons is those buyers that you mentioned, like they do have a very hard job. And I think a lot of the times it's a lot like when somebody's hiring someone and looking at resumes, they find things that they can like say, okay, we're looking for high protein. And so then like I'll screen for high protein because there's so many things I could look for. Um, and then you end up in this place where there are people trying to play the game of, well, could I be what they're looking for? And the problem is what they're looking for changes all the time.
Yeah.
And you know that better probably than anyone else. Like you in the plant-based milk space, it was hot, it was super hot, and then it wasn't hot at all. And right now it's probably kind of meh. Like it's not hot, it's not hot, it just is, which is awesome.
The data is
And
really interesting too. I just met with Spins last week, and like the legacy brands are in decline in our category. They're not able to keep up. The processed label isn't what people are looking for. People have kind of become more aware of the ingredients and the
They got a
sugar.
lot of bad press too, which
Yeah,
doesn't
that
help.
too. That's true. And
in
so
the
now
area.
what we're seeing is the brands that have organic or less sugar or cleaner label or more protein, even just one of those, they are growing like crazy. The organic brands are growing at least 30% year over year. We were the fastest growing brand in Nielsen last year, Willis was. So yeah, when you see, I think it's a recalibration. I think there were a lot of copycats of what Oatly was doing. A lot of companies just went to the same lab for the same formulation. And so now that people are looking for something better that is truly plant-based, we're seeing a recalibration where there's a lot of growth happening in the category. It's just not happening with the brands it was happening with a few years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you try
and
to kill the 800-pound gorilla in the room. It's like, it's the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Don't try to be them. Yeah.
Right,
yeah, don't
right.
don't do that. I think it's fascinating though that people try to trend follow when it is impossible. And it
Yeah,
seems that like when somebody comes from a problem-based background or like a family recipe-based background and they stick to
yeah.
their guns generally over the course of time. So we're talking like 10, 20, 30 years, works out almost every time. One of my good friends, Jason Burke, runs New Primal, and he's ran New
Know
Primal
him.
so long that meat sticks have been popular and then not popular, so not popular that they pivoted to sauce, and then
Right.
so popular again that now they're like on the moon, right? But he knows that like this is simply a like up and down that will continue to happen. And if you stick to like what is your core value or like what you're attempting to do and just kind of shut out the noise, over the course of time, you'll do really well. But it requires you not to do this label game or this trend following where like you start trying to be things that you shouldn't, or you start trying to copy people, which is a terrible place to get to in my mind. You guys have clearly not done that. So I guess you guys didn't go into food service. Like what was the first like big place where you guys sold the product? Like were you like D2C centric, or like did you find a retailer that launched it?
We were in we have been in food service, but we then kind of started going after retail and Amazon, especially in the pandemic. It was like, okay, we got to get on Amazon, right? And so that I would say was kind of our first big customer, to be honest. Amazon was a huge part of our growth in the early days and just like a way to get awareness. The whole purchase funnel happens in like a second there. And then we also had Erewhon reach out. So Erewhon and some co-ops were our first retailers. And then we just kept going after more independent grocers, smaller distributors. We work with Rainforest on the East Coast. We work with CPW in the Midwest. We're starting an agreement with Rock Island on the West Coast. And going after those independent grocers and co-ops in the early days. And yeah, and then just like you're saying, we really have always stuck with our guns on the value side of things. I think the other thing that is a big part of my story and Willa's story is that year of the pandemic was brutal, not only because we were going after food service and our whole business strategy had to change and expand, but I was blindsided with breast cancer in January of 2020. Right now, this time around 2020, I was starting chemo. I was pitching investors in a wig on Zoom because I lost my hair. I did chemo for 5.5 months. It was wild. I was working full time. I was able to work through all of it. I worked out 5 days a week. I mean, I was jumping rope, lifting weights. I continued living my life. So I always like to share that, because if you're somebody who is faced with a health crisis and you're an entrepreneur, like you will be able to hopefully still live your life and keep going. And I think, eating more plant-based, working out, meditating, I was able to learn so much through that year. And thankfully, by the time they went in for my lumpectomy surgery, it was gone. It was a complete response. I'm in a very high top percent of people in terms of my response to chemo and everything. My oncologist said I made her all month. And so I feel really, really fortunate. And that experience really validated and further solidified our commitment to doing things that are better for you and better for the planet, and not just net neutral, but have a net positive impact on the health of people and the planet. And it changed my perspective in so many ways on how to run this business. And in those moments where people have asked us, like, would you ever stop using organic oats if there was another bad oat crop and you couldn't get the, like, no, I would close the business before I would do that. So yeah, it's been quite a long road, but also one that has been so fulfilling, and it has allowed me to grow so much more than I would have otherwise.
I have so many
That is
questions
insane.
now. Now, you waited until the middle of the interview to bring this up. This is like
Sorry,
when I
well,
tell people my house burned down, Daniel. They're always
oh
just like,
God, I'm sorry
whoa.
to hear that.
Well, I'm
God.
sorry that you had cancer, Christina.
Well,
So
thank
like
you.
it's a
Thank
little
you.
different. Things are different than people.
I,
I think that
I was
I'm
fortunate to catch it
fascinated.
early too.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by like how that shaped your perspective. You kind of touched on it already though, but like a lot of people, I mean, there's a lot of research out there about like different foods and how they have impact on someone who has cancer, and whether they
Yeah.
like upregulate their mTOR or downregulate it, make it more like easier to basically do chemo to fight the cancer, to shrink the tumor. So did that like whole experience, I mean, it's crazy that you had already started the business. You may have
Yeah.
already been aware of that stuff and like probably just continued to change your diet,
I
but like,
doubled down.
yeah, did it make you like, I guess afterward and like after it's over and after you become like kind of a proof point for yourself, um, like did that just make you like ridiculously committed to like the vision? I imagine in like a way that like
Yes.
most entrepreneurs can't be.
Yeah. I think there are actually a lot of food and beverage entrepreneurs in our industry that are cancer survivors too. It's
There are,
interesting,
yeah.
right? Orgain, Sweet Lawrence, there's a lot of them. So when I was diagnosed, I sort of felt like things were just being done to me. I'm going and having all these tests done. People are telling me I'm going to get all these chemicals pumped into my body. I have to go through radiation. I felt like I was losing agency in my role in this. And so for me, eating more plant-based, not eating things that don't make me feel great, right? Like I not eating dairy was great for me. Having more fiber, eating lots of cruciferous vegetables, having broccoli sprouts, flax, omega-3s. Like I was really intentional. And then the workouts were actually huge. People don't tell you this, but if you work out after chemo, it raises your body temperature and it helps pump the chemo through your whole body. So let's say, this is a scary thought, but let's say there's a microscopic cancer cell in your bones. You're pumping this medicine through your whole body, so it gives you a longer, it basically improves your outcomes forever. And when I heard that, I was like, hell, I'm going to work out. And so I worked out almost 5 to 6 days a week. Most of the time I worked out almost after every chemo infusion or went on a really hard hike.
That's
And I
badass.
can't say that that's
That is hard to do.
it's like it couldn't have hurt. It couldn't have hurt. I think it probably did have an impact on my outcome, but it also kept me sane, which was really important living in New York City during a pandemic with, going through cancer treatment, not being able to see friends, not being able to even go to like outside parties. Like I was afraid to walk down the street because we just didn't know how I could get it. So, yeah, it was really formative, but it also gave me some gifts, which I think I would have punched myself in the throat if I heard myself saying that in 2020. I'd be like, fuck you, Christina, this is not a gift. But now I can see some things that were really good about it. There's no dress rehearsals in life. You know what I mean? And so I don't worry as much about like, if Willis is having an expensive month, I can't pay myself as much. I can't buy an extra pair of pants. Like, fine. It's like, I don't care. And it also means that, like you were saying, does it change my perspective working on Willows? I believe that during my, life on this planet, I want to have a positive impact in everything that I do. I want to have a positive impact on the people I work with and the people in my life. And I want to have a positive impact on this planet. And I want to have a positive impact on people's health. And so, our competitors would laugh at what we spend for, our organic Raka cacao and our coconut sugar. But for us, it's just, there's no other way. So we've just got to figure it out and keep improving our margins, which we have, and remember why we're doing this in the first place.
Yeah, and I think like, I mean, at least for me, it's what I've found from adversity is that it allows you to see things not only in a different way, but sometimes see things that you just straight up did not see before. Like things that were
Yeah.
not part of your worldview, they weren't even on your radar. And then suddenly they become very like apparent to you. And you're like, oh, I care about this issue, or like I care about this thing. Um, and I think, yeah, I mean, yes, while you're going through it, you're probably like, no, like yourself that's going through the thing is probably like, I hate you.
Yeah.
But on
No.
the other side of it, 5 years later, 6 years later, it, you know, it usually becomes a positive in your life, which is very strange.
It is very strange. Yeah, it gives you just a different outlook on everything. And I think it's also affected just the whole culture of our team. Like we have been through so much together that like
Mm.
when, challenges arise, which pretty much happens every week when you're in CPG, there's so much out of your control. We're a lot more able to roll with the punches. And one thing that's been really exciting to me is in the early days, we would look at every problem as like, oh God, does this mean this is the end? Oh, is this going to ruin everything? You go into that anxiety spiral. Now we look at a problem as like, oh, this is an opportunity for creativity. And sometimes our best ideas come out of those moments of like, shoot, what happened? Okay, wait, well, how can we, oh, there's this other thing that we've been thinking about doing anyway. Maybe this is the time to do it. So
Yeah,
you
the
can have,
creativity aspect is
yeah,
so true because I've had this conversation a lot with many different people in my life recently. I don't know why, but there's this weird thing that happens when you get addicted to having a lot of like all the resources you need. So like I work for a big company, the budget is there, everything's fine, everything's operating efficiently. There's not a lot of challenges. The creativity like doesn't exist. And then the creativity exists so much more when there's a lack of resources. There is no money. You have to figure out like somehow to make something happen, and yet it's not supposed to happen. And then sometimes through that solution, you find like these amazing things. I'll give you an example. So like we couldn't figure out how to get the cost of our product down. It was just like margin problem after margin problem, like during the pandemic. Or an even better example, which I guess is part of the same example. When Megan and I were first building No Baked, they're building it as a restaurant company. And we had 10 stores open. The pandemic happens. My daughter was born on March 31st of 2020. So we had very like a lot of anxiety, right? And we were very
yeah.
young. And we weren't necessarily planning to become young parents or planning for there to be a pandemic or planning for our business to be like jacked up. It happened anyways. Through that, we had one of the most creative and best years of the company ever because we were forced to take like the things you had. Like we had this store that got hit by a tornado at the beginning of March,
Oh my gosh.
or the neighborhood got hit by a tornado rather. So like the store was fine. The power got turned back on. The pandemic happened. And then I was like, what do we do with the store? Is our biggest store. We were like, we could turn it into a like shipping and manufacturing facility. It's like, why would you think that? I don't know. But like, I was like, we have no other choice. And then like April, May, a lot of other things like started to fall into place. We were like, how could we be creative with ads, with influencers? How could we like sell products online? Which was not something we had done. And we had done it before, like in small ways, but not big. Um, and it turned into this very like weird behemoth. It's right around the time I met Daniel. So he saw me during this time. And I continuously had employees say to me or like look at me and be like, dude, we can't do that. Like, it's not going to work. And I was like, oh, yes, it is. Because like you're in a place where you have no option but for it to work. You're like, we have to make this weird pivot. It doesn't feel good. A lot of the people that were working for us packing boxes were people that had been working in our scoop shops. And they had been like in college and now they were on online classes and living in Nashville like by themselves and like their parents are far away and they're like quarantined their apartment. This is like their only outlet and it's just not the like way they thought things would go. And so it was from like every rung of the ladder, whether it was like their little life or like our business or like other things, like that adversity caused like a lot of things to change. But then like on the other side of it changed a little bit for the better. I also believe that like had I continued to grow our franchise system and succeeded at a younger age with no adversity, I'd be a terrible person. I have that theory about a lot of people. Like I think that if you don't have some kind of like weird thing happen to you in the middle, which our middle happens to last for like 4 or 5 years, uh, but if that doesn't happen, do you become the person you were supposed to become? I don't know. And like maybe
Yeah.
it's supposed to happen, but it does cause creativity. And I find that fascinating. Like you guys at a startup at Willows have probably focused or you feel problems weekly, like you said, in food and beverage CPG that feel like company killers. But as you, I think, grow and get better at doing your job, you start realizing that they're just kind of like opportunities to be better than the big guy, right? Because you'll end
Yeah.
up doing things that they hadn't thought.
Right. And one of your benefits, one of your strengths is that you have a small team. You can be agile. Like, it's of course not easy to turn a ship completely, say you want to completely change your packaging or something like that. But you don't have to go through all these rungs of a ladder. And so you can figure out ways to do things nimbly and speedily and use your grit and just like call in favors and, beg and borrow where you can. And those are really good skills to build anyway.
They are.
I've both begged and borrowed, so yes, I can relate to
I
that.
mean,
Absolutely.
I've robbed Peter to pay Paul. I've done all of it.
I'll never forget one of Gary Hirschberg's Hirschberg Institutes. He got up there and he was like, your job as a founder is to figure out where you can beg, borrow, and steal, because that's what you will need to do. And we're all looking at each other like, really? You just got up on stage and
Yes.
said this? But then you learn, yeah, no, that's true. I mean, maybe not the stealing, but the, begging
It
and
feels like
borrowing
it's
for
okay.
sure.
Yeah, it's not stealing if it returns.
It's
I don't
borrowing
know.
for a little
Yeah.
while. It'll go back. Yeah.
It feels like theft sometimes. No, that's funny. I can't believe you said that. But I can at the same time. Yeah, I mean that's kind of your job is. So you guys like really started to like come to your own, I guess, like during and like kind of after like the pandemic. What has been the biggest surprise for you over the last like 5 years, like growing and running Willis? Like, has it been like who has been buying the products? Like what retailers it's been doing well at? Like what was surprising?
So many things, but if I were to think of the biggest surprise, I think actually the evolution of the consumer has been really interesting. So like in the early days, I remember I have this really visceral memory of a friend of mine who's vegan telling me like, I don't really care what's in these products as long as they're not animal based. And I was like, shit, if that is where we're headed, we're not really solving a problem for people. If people just stop caring what's in stuff and they just don't, want animal products. And we didn't know for sure where the consumer was headed. I mean, we can see right now there's like a lot of really crazy swings going on in consumer sentiment around food and the food system. And we just kind of stuck to our guns and our values. And we're like, and as a result, in many ways, Willis has always been ahead. Now a lot of our competitors are trying to clean things up, but they still have a lot of sugar. They don't have any protein or fiber, or they have very little. And we were doing these Costco roadshows last fall. And I was really amazed by how much people cared about sugar, because for years we were talking about sugar and everybody was like, these plant-based milks are healthy. What are you talking about? And then the other thing that was really fascinating to me is these apps are now I think the biggest influencers are in our industry. I mean, people were shopping Costco and they wouldn't buy things unless it got a good score on Yuka or it was Bobby approved. And Willa's happens to be Bobby approved and happens to have, scores in the 90s on Yuka. So in some ways, I think just sticking to your guns and your values and talking to experts, we talked a lot with chefs like Dan Barber and Michelin star chefs that are in the wellness spaces similar to him, as well as like, people like Dan Buettner, the founder of the Blue Zones, is one of our fans and just somebody who's a hero to me personally. So we talked to a lot of people and got a lot of input because we wanted to figure out, what are the actual things that are good for longevity? What are the actual things that are good for our health versus kind of what are the trends flowing from side to side and swinging really hard sometimes? What are they saying?
Yeah, I mean,
So in
the
one sense,
trends
the
swing
consumer
really
kind of met
hard.
you.
Really hard.
Yeah. In one sense, the consumer kind of came to you versus the other way around. Like you said, we're here, and the consumer over time kind of found their way to you, which is amazing.
Thank you.
I think that's what any good product does.
Yeah, it's like you're listening to yourself and your own values, and you're also listening to what people want, right? And it's kind of like finding those intersections and then deciding what makes sense for the packaging. Because sometimes what is important to you is not important to them. So maybe that doesn't need as prominent of a space,
Yeah, I feel like you listen to the consumer to a point, right? Like you said, like, hey, people clearly like plant-based milk, right? And like people clearly like a few other things, but like we think that, this is the way that we can deliver plant-based milk to you and it be good for you. And so then the consumer says, cool, I want it to taste good. You're like, great, I'll make it taste good. Um, I've now like kind of like not necessarily hoodwinked you, but like, or tricked you, but like really just given you a gift of like, well, it's low in sugar. Congratulations. It actually has protein, which by the way, I think a big part of why the shift happened, which I think is hilarious. I have so much fun thinking about this, where 2020, 2019, people are like, go vegan. Like the Game Changer documentary happens, like all the stuff, right? And like I went vegan for 3 months, which is so wild. And so I was a part of this for a little while, which makes me feel dumb, but is what it is. Like you have this like moment where you're like, oh, well, plant-based is what we should be. Cause like, and you can name the reasons. There are many good reasons behind being plant-based, by the way. It's still in my mind. And then people find out like, well, a lot of these products have like too much sugar. They don't provide protein the way they should. So like a lot of people that went vegan then like have all kinds of issues, right? Like fiber issues, protein issues, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so then they swings all the way back over the next like, and it seems with culture too, which is very strange. So it swings from like this like kind of like left leaning vegan thing to like this like right leaning like we're gonna drink raw milk thing, which is
Carnivore
confusing
diet.
to me, right? Right.
Yeah.
None of it makes any sense because neither of these things at the edges are good for you at all.
Right.
And so it's a reverse, and it's kind of like a response to all of the things that you guys actually responded to by just saying like, hey, well, we could probably develop an oat milk with like protein and fiber, and like it'll hit all of the metrics that you want it to hit, and now it's not bad for you. And by the way, it's organic, so it won't kill you. And I'm sure there's still people out there that are like, which I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Like, oats are known as like a thing that like have tons of glyphosate. Is that kind of what the organic thing is for? Like, do
Yeah.
organic oats have glyphosate on them or no?
They can't use glyphosate or synthetic herbicides, so no. You can also get glyphosate-free oats that aren't organic. We prefer to have organic certified and glyphosate-free certified because, you could find a different herbicide that's almost as
See,
bad
so
as glyphosate then.
you guys already addressed all of the problems that these people that like went fully carnivore had, and they didn't have to drink raw milk in order to
You don't have to
solve their
drink raw
problem.
milk. There
That
are other
wasn't
options.
necessary. They could do anything
Yeah.
else.
Never necessary.
You also don't have to stop eating vegetables because,
Yeah, no,
we
you
do
don't.
need
You should eat your
fiber.
vegetables. Yeah, eat your dang
It's
vegetables.
it's just a fascinating thing where like the correction was so much smaller than what people wanted it to be, and also like there are people that have dairy intolerance, and it's like, well, where are they when they're like, oh, well, these things are unhealthy, I guess I'll go back to drinking milk, and then they feel bad, and then they're like, I don't know what to do, and they listen to health influencers, and these people half the time are completely insane, and they're like, you need to go on a fully raw diet of like either we're going carnivore or we're going like vegan, and we don't really know why, and it's like instead maybe you can focus on the science, which seems to be like where you guys landed. And it's probably like, kudos to your success. I think it has a lot to do with you guys, but also probably a little bit to do with your products and the fact that you've kind of like stayed true to your guns. We're going to deliver something that's good for people based on the science. I think it's cool.
You just made me think of, thank you. You just made me think of something else that I think is really important if you're starting a food or beverage brand is to think about the most people that will enjoy your product. I think one of the problems with all of the conversations on social media where it's like, you have to eat this way or it's bad. You have to eat like me or what you're doing is bad. It's like, what feels good for one person's body doesn't necessarily work for another person's body. We don't all have to eat and drink the same things. We don't have the same body chemistry. Like our microbiomes are different. Like what you should listen to what feels good to you. Flax is really good for you, but for some people it makes them feel terrible. So like maybe do something else like chia, right? Like, and so when we were picking ingredients, a lot of times we think about like what is easy for most people to digest. Or in a kid's product, a lot of the kids' products out there are actually really hard to digest, and kids have very sensitive stomachs. And I'm sure you can attest, Jimmy, if your kid's up all night sick, everybody is, right? Nobody's sleeping.
Terrible.
So we really wanted to make sure this was something that like had pure ingredients and ingredients that most kids can digest and you also don't have allergies to. So I think that's just another thing to think about if you're starting a food or beverage brand. Are there ingredients that you can use and double down on that most people will feel good consuming?
Yeah, I mean, like that's like the same thing if even if you're starting like a restaurant in your city. Like you would design a menu that you thought like, okay, this is gonna hit with most people. It like I'll slip some stuff in there that I think like, hey, I want to help you discover something that you may have never tried before, but I'm definitely gonna serve like these core items that I think most people will find exciting, appetizing. They'll eat it and they won't feel bad afterwards.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't necessarily think about that, but that is something that people think about, chefs, like as far as like portioning and delivering their food. You someone thinks about your restaurant um afterwards as well, right? Like if I eat somewhere and I get sick, my wife hates Cracker Barrel. She hates it, despises Cracker Barrel. You can ask Megan, why do you hate Cracker Barrel? She hates Cracker Barrel because she went there one time. Well, first of all, she always thought it was janky. And then she went there one time because her mom was like, let's go to Cracker Barrel. She's like, fine. And she got sick afterwards and got food poisoning. And so for the rest of time, she's like, I hate Cracker Barrel. It's because
Fair.
she got food poisoning, right? But the same thing happens of like, oh, I ate somewhere, I felt super full, then I felt like shit. Like, I'm not going back. I don't
Yeah.
want to go back. I have no desire
Yeah.
to feel like that again. So it's like these feelings are like in the moment and then after directly afterwards, and then like 3 days later. And sometimes 3 days later you forget about directly afterwards. Anyone who's ever drank, gotten super hungover, and then drank again can attest to that. But you do think about all three periods of time and your brain holds those. And so like you do have to care about like how do people feel after they eat your thing. Like, yeah, if kids can't digest it and they feel bad, they're not going to want to keep eating it. I had a very sensitive stomach when I was a kid. And I feel like because of when I grew up, my parents didn't care, neither did anybody else.
It's a
But
different time.
it was a different time. But it just caused me to eat less because I was like, I
Mm.
don't want to eat all the time. And then I ate an absurd amount of fruit all of the time. And my mom was always like, why do you guys eat so much fruit? And I was like, yeah, because it's the one thing that makes me feel great.
I think you
So
and
it's
I
just
are on the same, yeah, I was similar.
right. Yeah. And like you have other things that just don't make you feel good. And you're like, I don't want to eat this processed food. I don't know why. I'm a kid.
Right,
It's not
right.
science based. It's like what you said. Eat what makes your body feel good. There's some stuff to that. And maybe the fact that like children don't think too hard about it. Like they end up making the right choices. My kids can eat whatever they want in my house. We don't necessarily not buy like, I mean, we do buy mostly good food, actually. There's some junk food. There's like baked goods, cookies, like things like that. We'll like bake and like put cookies out like basically every day, but they don't choose them constantly. They choose like what makes them feel good, and I can tell. And it's kind of interesting watching them do that.
Do you think part of that is because they're allowed to have the cookies? So it's not
Maybe
like, ooh, you can't have
Absolutely.
cookies, but now they're out, so get them while you can, kind of thing.
The funny thing is Megan likes to bake, but
Intuitive
she doesn't
eating.
like to eat it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Megan continues baking, and then she's the only person that doesn't eat the cookies. I'm like, why do you keep doing this? Because then you guys know who eats most of them? Me. I eat them, and I don't want to eat them.
Hey,
Anyways,
think about it this way. At
yeah,
least you can dip it in a high protein, high fiber oat milk.
I
That's
can actually
true.
because Christina sent me samples. Although most
Nice.
of it's gone, I
I'll
just have
send
the
you some
barista
too,
one left.
Danielle.
Uh, it's really good. It is
Happy to
really good.
send you both more.
My kids did really like your guys' kids SKUs, by the way.
I would love to hear that.
Which I was like, oh, that's cool. They were like attracted to like those ones, which, you know, I imagine that's what you're going for.
It is what we're going for. We did a lot of
Yeah.
taste tests with kids between like 2 and 17 years old. And we did not finalize that formulation until I think it was over 80% of the kids were saying to their parents, I want you to buy this. So yeah,
That's
that
cool.
was
That was really, really cool.
it was fun. That was really fun actually. If you're
Yeah.
building a
So
kids product, it's actually quite fun to see how kids react to it.
it is. I tell people all the time, and I said this on the podcast, and I think posted a clip of it, but I have this thing that I call the kid test where like if I get a product sample or even if I like bring things home from Costco, I generally like am curious to see what our kids think of it. There's some things that I know they won't like that I like a lot. Like there's this bone broth company that makes like they make sticks of bone broth, so you put it in water. It's amazing. I fucking love
Convenient.
their bone broth. Yeah, it's really convenient. I put like two of them in like a pot and then put it in like side of a like cup and carry it around like a weirdo.
Ooh,
But so like
love
instead of
that.
coffee, I drink bone broth. But
Yum.
anyways, my kids don't like that. But like
No,
that's
I can
like
see that.
my thing, right? I'm always curious to
Yeah.
see what they like though, because I'm like generally the things that they like, and they're very honest. Like those are
Yeah.
things that are gonna do really well. I could just tell. I'm like, this is going to kill it because they like it. I was gonna ask you though. So we're near the end. What's next for Willis? Like, what are you guys' plans for like the next like 1-2 years? Like, any cool, exciting things that you're gonna try or do that you can tell us
Yes.
about?
We're always brainstorming around new innovations. Often we have more ideas than we're able to, you know, more ideas than it makes sense to launch with. But these kids products, they have 8 grams of protein. They have as much protein as a protein shake and all clean, simple ingredients. When we were at Costco doing, sampling for 12 plus hours a day, it seemed like 12 hours. I'm actually not sure if it was, but it felt like 12 hours.
It probably
Sampling,
feels like that.
yeah, thousands of conversations with people. 30 to 50% of these were purchased by adults for themselves. And so we were like, okay, we thought we were onto something here, but that's the next phase, which I'm really, really excited about. Because, we're all trying to get more protein and fiber, but want to do so through ingredients that make us feel good and are clean label and, we can actually pronounce. And so, yeah, I'm really excited about some of the stuff we're working on there. And then we're always thinking about new flavors and stuff like that, ways we can use real ingredients rather than natural or artificial flavors, but real ingredients to create new flavors.
That's really exciting. I love
Super
that.
cool.
Daniel was you'll love that. Since
Oh yeah.
that's what you drink basically. Daniel gets all of his protein through like ready to eat, or I mean ready to drink, like
Pretty
random
much.
protein drinks from like
Oh,
Sam's Club and Costco.
Yeah.
You're
As long
oh,
you're
as
the
you
I
can
Sam's
might,
find
Club.
that.
if we can, I'd love to like chat with you just for research purposes and
Sure.
get your
Yeah. Yeah.
thoughts on what you
Absolutely.
like and don't like and what you're,
Yeah, we can do it after the episode's over. Yeah,
awesome.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Well, Christina, tell everybody where they can find you. I know they can buy it on Amazon. That's probably a great place to get it. But where all can people find Willas? Where can they follow the brand? All that stuff.
Yep, you can find it on Amazon. You can find it on willoskitchen.com. We'll do 25% off for the behind the food promo code. You
Nice.
can find it at select Target stores, mostly on the coast, as well as the upper Midwest, like Minnesota. And then, Central Market, Citarella in New York, Lunds Byerly's in the Twin Cities, lots of the
I
independent
love
grocers. So
Lunds
you
and
can check out our.
Byerly's.
Do you?
It's random that you named that one, but I was like, I love that grocery store.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stores in Minneapolis, St. Paul area. That's where I'm originally from. Um, Skis, Lake Winds, The Wedge. But yeah, lots of independent grocers. So check out our store locator. And yeah, feel free to use that promo code behind the food.
Awesome. Thanks, Christina. Cool, guys. Well, this has been
Thank
another
you.
episode of Behind the Food Podcast. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions for Christina, this is live streamed on LinkedIn, so DM her. But it's been great. I'll see you guys later.
See you
Thank
guys.
you. See